Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie, and this is episode number 1048 for March 17th, 2024. Coming up in a few minutes.
It's almost like a game of hide and go seek. I walk in and I look at the back bar and I try to find it, and there it is looking right back at me, and it's a moment of joy.
It's been a while since we checked in with SIA Scotch Whisky founder Carin Luna-Ostaseski, almost 13 years to be exact. Since then, she successfully funded the launch of SIA through a Kickstarter campaign and eventually sold the brand to Diageo in 2019, though she remains involved with SIA on a day-to-day basis. She's one of the first women to create a modern Scotch whisky brand, and she'll join us later on WhiskyCast In-Depth. I'll also have the What I'm Tasting This Week department, Behind the Label, and much more. The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Did you know they made Patrick a saint for chasing all the snakes out of Ireland? If I can chase all the novelty leprechaun hats out of America, do I get sainted?
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Hey everyone, it's me, Gabriel Cardarello with Yours, and I'm here to introduce you to something very special. We've gone and blended the time-honored whiskey craftsmanship of Scotland with the whiskey-making finesse of Japan. And let me tell you, it's something truly remarkable. More on that in a minute.
Let's get started with the week's news. It's brought to you by the Dalmore. Despite a lackluster 2023, there is still a lot to celebrate on the Irish whiskey front. More than 57 million bottles of Irish whiskey were sold in the U.S. last year, according to the Distilled Spirits Council. About half of all Irish whiskey exports go to the U.S., making it the most important market for Irish whiskey worldwide. While Irish whiskey sales in the U.S. are up 878% over the last 20 years, last year was a rough one. The run-on effects of the pandemic on wholesaler inventories caused a 22% decline in Irish whiskey sales from the previous year, when volumes topped 6 million 9-liter cases for the first time. Meanwhile, Irish whiskey industry leaders were in Washington this week in the run-up to St. Patrick's Day looking for congressional support. They're pushing for the U.S. to grant geographical indication status for Irish whiskey, which already enjoys special protection under U.S. regulations as a distinctive product of Ireland. The Irish Whiskey Association wants to stop companies from putting imitation Irish-style whiskies on the market in the U.S. Now let's update a story we first brought you last fall after heavy flooding hit the town of Midleton, Ireland. The flooding did extensive damage to the Midleton Distillery Experience less than a month after it opened. Now, repairs have been completed, and the Visitor Center reopened to guests this week in time for St. Patrick's Day weekend celebrations. Chivas Brothers has opened a luxury tasting experience at Strathisla Distillery in Speyside. The 1,200-pound experience includes a private tour of the distillery and a sit-down with the company's archivist to learn the history of Chivas Brothers. The experience also includes 2 separate tastings of rare whiskies, including a set of casks in the vault that have never before been bottled. The casks were selected by master blender Sandy Hislop and last week's WhiskyCast guest, blending director Kevin Balmforth. And speaking of luxury whiskies, the Macallan is at it again in a collaboration with Bentley Motors. The Macallan Horizon comes in a horizontal bottle encased in leather, oak, and copper, recycled from the Macallan's old stills. The whiskey comes from 6 specially selected casks picked by Macallan master whiskey maker Kirstine Campbell. The price tag, $50,000 a bottle. I mentioned the Our Whiskey Foundation's Demeter Collection auction last time around. One of the whiskies to be featured in the auction is the initial release of Atonia's Legacy, a one-of-one bottling created exclusively by women. The Lakes whiskey maker Sarah Burgess created the blend, Glencairn's Christy Nicholson created the decanter and case, and ACO's Helen Abbott hand-bottled the whiskey, which honors the participants in the Our Whiskey Foundation's mentorship program. Future releases of Atonia's Legacy will be crafted by other women in the whiskey industry. The auction begins on March 29th and runs through April 8th at whiskeyauctioneer.com. Irish Distillers has released a new edition of Gold Spot Single Pot Still Irish Whiskey. The Generations edition is a 13-year-old whiskey finished for 16 months in Valpolicella Classica Italian wine casks. It'll be available in the U.S., Ireland, France, Irish duty-free shops, and the Jameson Bow Street and Middleton Distillery Experience shops for €150 a bottle. Teeling Whiskey Company in Dublin has a new distillery-exclusive bottling, a 17-year-old single malt finished in a cognac cask for 6 years. Only 228 bottles are available at the distillery website and through the Teeling's distillery shop for €180 a bottle. Royal Mile Whiskies is bringing back its dormant distillery label for a couple of releases, including a 25-year-old single cask from the old Imperial Distillery filled in 1998, the year Imperial was mothballed. It also includes a release from the old Caroni Rum Distillery. In the U.S., Chattanooga Whiskey has released a new experimental batch featuring an ancient strain of wheat. The 4-year-old blend of straight whiskeys is made with malted dinkel wheat to complement the distillery's Tennessee high malt style of whiskey. It's available at the distillery and online through Sealbox for $69.99 a bottle. Pursuit Spirits is releasing a new Pursuit United double-oaked bourbon. It takes the Pursuit Standard bourbon blend and finishes it in French oak toasted staves. It'll be available in limited quantities for $69.99 a bottle. Sagamore Spirit is bringing back its annual release of Manhattan Finish Rye Whiskey. It's finished for 20 months in a combination of vermouth, bitters, and cherry brandy barrels, and will be available nationwide in the U.S. for $79.99 a bottle. And finally, Crown Royal is expanding its flavored whiskey portfolio. Crown Royal Blackberry flavored whiskey is out now. It carries a recommended retail price in the U.S. of $26.99 a bottle. You can keep up with the latest whiskey news all week long at whiskycast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app. The news is brought to you by the Dalmore.
Hello, Richard Patterson here, Master Distiller, Master Blender for the Dalmore. You know, whenever the team and I are in the world sharing our exceptional single malt, we like to keep in touch with Mark Gillespie and the latest news from WhiskyCast.
Let's check the calendar and see what's happening around the world of whiskey. It's a busy week. Whiskey Live London is this Friday and Saturday, along with the inaugural Drinkmonger Spirits Festival in Edinburgh, Scotland. The Cork Whiskey Fest has events all weekend long, Friday through Sunday in Cork, Ireland. Tickets are still available for the Kentucky Derby Museum's Bourbon Legends Series event with Maker's Mark on the 27th in Louisville, Kentucky. Clackmannonshire's Whiskey Festival in Clackmannanshire, Scotland, Malt in France in Rennes, France, and Big Smoke Meets Whiskey Fest in Tampa, Florida are all on April 6th, and the Nth runs from April 15th through the 19th in Las Vegas, Nevada. If you're organizing a whiskey event, please let us know about it. We'll add it to the calendars at whiskycast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app.
Dewar's has truly been innovative in perfecting cask finishing, which has led to exceptional expressions of our craftsmanship. This extra step allows our whiskey to further mature in carefully selected casks and marks the final stage of our double aging process, or in Dewar's case, our double aging method, resulting in unique, indulgent tasting experiences. The new Dewar's Double 21-year Mizunara oak cask finish undergoes a meticulous 4-stage aging process, including being finished in sought-after Japanese Mizunara oak casks. Crafting these casks is challenging due to the non-straight growth of Mizunara oak, and it takes 200 years for these trees to reach full potential. The result, a masterfully balanced whiskey with notes of sandalwood, coconut, and creamy vanilla, to name a few. And while it's not the easiest to find, it's an unmissable experience.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Mortlock and the Classic Malts lineup. Carin Luna-Ostaseski created SIA Scotch Whisky more than a decade ago because she wanted an approachable Scotch for newcomers. Since then, her market has grown to 14 U.S. states and nationally online, and she's giving back by offering grants and mentoring to entrepreneurs from underserved communities. I first interviewed Carin in June of 2013 for episode 431 of WhiskyCast, just as she was launching SIA's Kickstarter campaign that helped get the brand started, and we caught up this week. It's been almost 11 years since we last talked. How has the brand grown over that 11-year period?
Wow, Mark, it has been an amazing journey. So SIA is now in 14 states across the U.S. We have an incredible presence in both on and off-premise locations, so stores, bars, and restaurants. We've received numerous awards, 96-point rating from the Ultimate Spirits Challenge, a double gold medal from the San Francisco World Spirits Competition. Whiskey Advocate magazine gave us their highest rating in 2015 for a blended Scotch. And we were recently featured in Rolling Stone as their number 4 most recommended whiskey.
Not bad.
Thank you.
But what challenges have you faced since we last talked?
Oh, wow. So I would say the biggest challenge by far was fundraising. And any entrepreneur could attest to fundraising being a very incredible challenge while you're trying to grow and scale a business and at the same time trying to be out there and fundraise, set up meetings, networking, and whatnot. And I was rejected over 100 times from investors along the way. I'm happy to report that one of those rejections actually led me to a chance encounter meeting with Diageo, who eventually acquired the brand in 2019.
So now you're on solid financial ground. How do you get the whiskey made?
So we're fortunate to be working with Diageo's master blenders. I had the opportunity to work with Jim Beveridge, who was the master blender for Johnnie Walker, Emma Walker, who's now taken over the reins as master blender for Johnnie Walker, and Craig Wallace, who was the master blender for Old Parr and Buchanan's. So it was incredible to be able to work with this team of all-stars on recreating the SIA spirit.
Now, you created the original blend. What did you learn from them?
So the first couple blends I made in my kitchen, but eventually I started working with Douglas Lang on the blend for SIA. And what I learned was that the nose is such an incredible part of the taste experience. For someone who's new to Scotch, if there's too much smoke or peat on the nose, they might get a little turned off before they even taste it. So for SIA, it was really important to have these flavor profiles of vanilla, caramel, and some really incredible mid-palate notes of citrus and honey to really invite a whole new generation of people to this category that I love so much.
Now, for those who did not hear that original interview in 2013, give us the origin story. How did you get into Scotch in the first place, and why did you start SIA?
Yeah, so I fell in love with a brand called Oban 14 when I was in my 20s. And if you go on your Wayback Machine, this is at a time when all my girlfriends were drinking Cosmopolitans, all my guy friends were drinking Red Bull vodkas, and here I am trying to convince everyone to drink whiskey. And what was happening was, I think people thought the same thing that I did at first, that maybe it's their grandfather's drink, or maybe it's too expensive, or maybe it's too smoky. And in visiting Scotland quite a bit and reading books and really just immersing myself in the category, I learned that there's really a brand out there for everyone. And so I thought through the years hosting Scotch tasting events and really getting a sense for how can I, bring a new generation of people to this spirit, I realized that maybe the best way to do that was with a new blend. And so I had this idea for the blend. I had the passion and the drive and the motivation, but I didn't have any money. So I maxed out my credit cards. I took out a second loan against my home. I worked a second and a third job, and it still wasn't enough. So I ended up turning to Kickstarter to crowdfund SIA, making it the first ever spirit that was crowdfunded. And it made me one of the first women in history to start a brand of Scotch whiskey.
And the name comes from the Scottish Gaelic for 6, right?
That's correct. There were 6 whiskeys in the original blend. And my friend recently pointed out to me that it could stand for Scotch is awesome.
Hadn't thought of that, but that's a good marketing campaign.
And it's true.
What else have you learned since you started out?
I think what's been really important for me is that Scotch is so versatile. I've really enjoyed seeing all of the bartenders make their own creations with SIA. I've seen, cocktails that feature SIA in a mojito or a daiquiri, which are really fun as an homage to my Cuban roots. It's also been great to see it in, bourbon cocktails like an old fashioned or a paper plane, where it adds a little extra complexity. But even things that you wouldn't imagine, maybe like an espresso martini or, a pina colada. So it's really fun to see just how much fun people are having with their cocktail creativity with SIA.
You mentioned your Cuban heritage. Was that a help or a hindrance to you in terms of getting SIA off the ground and being a woman in the world of whiskey too?
I mean, the reality is I have no idea, right? I've never walked in someone else's shoes, so I don't know if it would have been easier. I know starting a business in general is extremely difficult, and that's why, from day one, I thought, how can I help other business owners get a leg up? And so from, I guess, the first year, I tallied up my sales and I thought, okay, I can donate $100 to this local charity that helps female entrepreneurs. And the next year was maybe like $200 to a minority entrepreneurs group. And as the brand grew, so did the program. And a couple of years ago, we launched a program called the Entrepreneurial Spirit Fund by SIA Scotch. And to date, I'm really proud to say that we've donated over $250,000 in the form of grants. So these are $10,000 grants that have gone to small business owners that are minorities, women, people from the LGBTQIA plus community, basically anybody that really needs help to start and scale their businesses. And then I also give personal mentorship as well.
Any success stories coming out of that?
It's been a while. There's a one that I spoke to recently. I try to keep tabs on everyone, every couple months, just kind of check in and see if there's anything that they need. It's been really fun to see the communities that they've built amongst themselves. Sometimes they'll send me photos when they're having meetups or any kind of brand collaborations they're having. But there was one entrepreneur that I spoke with when she and I first started working together. Her sales for her skincare line were maybe about $40,000 a year, and she's approaching $1 million in revenue 3 years later. I'm really proud of them.
That's a good success story.
Yeah.
Define the success story for SIA. What do you hope to accomplish over the next 10 years?
I think it's been wonderful just to see the category of blends become more elevated and accepted. I think watching the versatility of cocktails and seeing how people really enjoy Scotch in new ways. And I think just continuing to grow the brand. So right now we're in 14 states. I hope to scale to a national level of distribution and then someday maybe international.
Might we see a line extension at some point?
Oh, that would be a dream for me. I would love to do an aged expression someday, or maybe even, some kind of different sizes or, a cocktail. I mean, the sky's the limit.
How much creativity do you have, given that Diageo now owns the brand? How much of a day-to-day creative influence do you have on the brand?
It's been incredible. A lot of the time that I used to use towards supply chain or fundraising is now used to have moments like this where I can share the story and really go back to the roots of why I created the brand.
What was the reaction the first time you saw SIA on a bar shelf?
Oh, it was incredible. I invited about 15 of my friends to a bar in San Francisco, and I said, we got our first restaurant placement, and we finished the bottle that night. It was so much fun.
And now when you see a bottle on a shelf somewhere, what do you think?
I still get that feeling. It's almost like a game of hide and go seek. I walk in and I look at the back bar and I try to find it, and there it is looking right back at me. And it's a moment of joy.
Do you still pitch it to bartenders?
Oh yeah, all the time. It's very, very much still, work in progress. I love meeting bartenders, bar managers, store managers, and customers. One of my favorite things to do still to this day is bottle signings, where I get to stop someone in a store and, taste them on SIA. And they have that moment where I tell them it's a Scotch whiskey and they kind of brace for impact, if you will. And then they taste it. And I see this moment of just sheer delight on their face as they realize that they are now a Scotch drinker too.
Thanks to Carin Luna-Ostaseski for spending some time with us this week on WhiskyCast In-Depth. It's brought to you by Mortlach, whiskey's best-kept secret. Hidden away for decades in some of the world's most famous Scotch whiskies, comes a single malt inspired by an original for a fortunate few. Discover the entire Mortlach lineup at malts.com. Let's start the What I'm Tasting This Week department with the latest Islay Barley release from Bruichladdich. The 2014 edition is bottled at 50% ABV, and the nose is malty with a touch of lemon zest, dried flowers, apricots, and honey. The taste has barley sugar sweetness balanced by touches of clove and white pepper, along with apricots, honey, and hints of heather and brine. The finish is long with lingering spices and barley sugar sweetness. I'm scoring the Bruichladdich Islay Barley 2014 single malt a 93. Next up, Lost Lantern's release of its Far Flung Rye. This one is a blend of straight rye whiskeys from craft distilleries in Indiana, Iowa, Ohio, and Wisconsin. It's 4 years old and bottled at 60.8% ABV. The nose has touches of baking spices along with rye bread, honeycomb, a soft oakiness, and hints of vanilla and molasses cookies. The taste is thick and syrupy and is led by clove and cinnamon spices, balanced nicely by caramel, honey, tree fruits, and a touch of oak. The finish is long and dry with lingering spices, and I'm scoring Lost Lantern's Spring 2024 edition of Far Flung Rye a 93. Now, let's turn to a couple of Irish whiskies for St. Patrick's Day. The Kentucky-based bottler High and Wicked has released an Irish single-grain whiskey distilled at West Cork Distillers and finished in Foursquare rum casks. It's bottled at 50% ABV, and the nose has touches of lemon peel, pineapple, almond oil, and hints of figs and molasses. The taste has a nice balance of baking spices, caramel candy, hazelnuts, and hints of mango and papaya. The finish is long and subtle with a citrusy tartness, and I'm scoring the High and Wicked Foursquare Irish single-grain whiskey a 92. Finally, I teased this one on social media the other day. Can a Trader Joe's house brand Irish whiskey stand up to the higher-priced competition? Sadly, no. The Trader Joe's Special Reserve Irish Whiskey comes from an undisclosed distillery and is bottled at 40% ABV. The nose has touches of buttered popcorn, butterscotch, dried fruits, and a hint of honey. But the good stuff ends there. The taste? Well, it tastes like lighter fluid with dried fruits and is slightly butyric with an off-putting flavor. The finish is malty and grainy with touches of barley sugar and popcorn. Even at $15.99 a bottle, it's not a good deal. I'm scoring the Trader Joe's Special Reserve Irish Whiskey a 78. I'll be adding these whiskeys to our searchable list of nearly 3,700 different whiskeys from all around the world. Check it out this week at whiskeycast.com.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Trying to fit the best of Ireland into one day, huh? Good luck. Takes us at least 12 years?
Happy St. Patrick's Day from Redbreast, proud sponsor of WhiskyCast.
Let's see what people are talking about this week. Our community segment is brought to you by Waterford Whiskey. I was in Los Angeles for a family visit this past week, and we went to the Getty Museum for an afternoon of art. Saw a bust of an extremely frustrated man. In fact, it's called The Vexed Man, and I decided it was meme-worthy. Posted it on social media with the caption, "You want me to pay how much for that bourbon?" Had a lot of responses to it. Danny Pearson commented on Facebook, "Amen, they're out of control." Pierre Mullen in New Brunswick responded with an image of Edvard Munch's classic The Scream, and the tagline, "Scotch single malts are even worse." Our good friend Taylor Darnell chimed in with this, "Pierre, pretty much any whiskey or liquid containing alcohol in Canada is worthy of your Munch painting. I had decided to buy myself a bottle of the Uncle Nearest 1884 as part of my post-New Brunswick reward and continued U.S. whiskey education. See attached pictures for the price in my local liquor store versus one in the United States. I rest my case." Her photos showed an Uncle Nearest 1884 priced in the U.S. at $41.99 a bottle, and the same bottle in British Columbia at $119.99 Canadian. That's about $89 US at current exchange rates. If you have a whiskey pricing horror story, share it with us in the WhiskyCast community app or on social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, X, and Threads at WhiskyCast, and my email address is comments@whiskycast.com. Our community segment is presented by Waterford Whiskey on the web at waterfordwhiskey.com.
That's the sound of our whiskey growing on Dunbell Farm, County Kilkenny. We know where every grain comes from. Only Irish barley, one farm, one terroir at a time. Waterford Whiskey, the most naturally flavoursome single malt.
Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and people who make whiskey unique. It's brought to you by Balcones Distilling. We talk and lament a lot about Scotland's lost distilleries, but virtually every whiskey-making country has its share of lost distilleries. In his new edition of Canadian Whiskey, The Essential Portable Expert, our good friend Davin de Kergamo devotes a chapter to some of Canada's distilleries that have been lost to history. Take, for example, the Royal Distillery in Hamilton, Ontario. It started out as a vinegar works in 1883 under the leadership of Benjamin E. Charlton, but eventually switched over to distilling alcohol for whiskey instead, and just 10 years later, Royal whiskies were being sold all over Canada. Eventually, Charlton changed the name of the company to the Hamilton Distilling Company. After he died in 1901, his successors eventually fell out of interest with distilling, and in 1918 the distillery was put up for sale. 4 years later, the distillery buildings were sold off and converted to other uses. Today, the building that housed the distillery's offices is a karaoke bar. Thanks to Davin de Kergamo for his excellent update of the definitive guide to Canadian whiskey history. It's available at Amazon.com and wherever you buy books. And if you have something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just get in touch with us. Behind the Label is brought to you by Balcones Distilling, the original Texas whiskey at the forefront of the American single malt movement, exploring place and provenance with unique style whiskeys, ranging from the award-winning Texas One and Lineage American single malts to their Baby Blue straight corn whiskey and Texas Rye bottled in bond. Discover whiskey from a new perspective at balconesdistilling.com. That's all for this episode of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, the whiskey photo of the week, and, of course, a complete archive of all of our past episodes that goes all the way back to 2005. Get in touch with us on X, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast, or you can use the WhiskyCast community app. Download it today from the iOS or Google Play app stores. Our email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
Dewar's Double 21-year-old Mizunara Oak Cask Finish is like a worldly whiskey adventure you simply can't miss. Courtesy of your friends at Dewar's. Savor it responsibly. Copyright 2024, Dewar's Blended Scotch Whisky, 46% alcohol by volume.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
The average college basketball power forward is 6'9", which, according to my rough calculations, is 16.5 times my height. I'll stick to aimlessly pottering around in back gardens.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2024. And comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.